A Hashtag Studios production. Okay, so this video is titled Chapter 4 Quiz Video for the ITGS IB textbook, Chapter 4 on Networks. It's a quiz testing your understanding of the chapter for use only after either reading it or watching the other content videos made about that chapter. And so this quiz video is going to function just like the others. The questions will be presented first, and then the answers will be presented later. They're all going to be straight from the text, and they're going to, basically, you can use them to analyze how well you remembered everything from the chapter. So it's best if you, when you see the questions, to pause the video, record your answers, and then when the answers are presented at the end, compare yours to the ones in this video. So question 1, part 1. Identify two hardware components of a network. Part 2. Define the term thin client network. Part 3. Explain how a network administrator can control access to resources on a network. Pause the video and record your answers now. Question 2. Part 1. State two units used to measure network speed. Part 2. Define Metropolitan area network. Part 3. Explain how computers on a network are identified. Pause the video and record your answers now. The third question is going to be actually a sort of set of questions, and they're going to be either true or false. And so there's 5 different sort of prompts here. The first one is, hardware address is another term for IP address. Is that true or false? Second, an IP address can uniquely identify any computer in the world. Is that true or false? Third, a modem is needed for all connections to the internet. True or false? Fourth, a peer-to-peer network has no centralized server. Fifth, servers perform jobs including user authentication. So record whether or not those answers are true or false. Pause the video and do that now. Okay, so getting ready to take a look at the answers for all 3 of those questions presented. So the first one was a multi-part, and it asked, identify 2 hardware components of a network. Well, as it might be assumed, you have to have some kind of a computer to host the network. So a client computer is the first piece of hardware. And then any one of the 3 devices that can connect the computer to the network. There were 3. There were switches, routers, or hubs. Any one of the 3 would probably be acceptable. Router, though, is usually more common, so that's what's written here. For part 2, it wanted a definition of a thin client network. And so, thin client network is a network where clients rely on a server not only to store files, but to also run software on behalf of the client. So, thin client network is really the input that the client has is relatively thin. The server is processing most of the tasks through the network. And then the next question was, how can network administrators monitor resources through the network? And there are 2 different network protocols that can be used for that monitoring. There's the Simple Network Monitoring Protocol, SNMP, or the Windows Management Instrumentation Protocol. And both of these help network administrators to know, say, if a web page is down through the network, or if there is an identification problem, or the access to the network is being restricted. Any sort of problem that might hinder access to the network, those 2 protocols are sort of a way to streamline notifications to the network administrator. The second question wanted 2 units for network speed. Kilobits and megabits are the 2 most commonly used units. It's in bits per second. Then it wanted a sort of definition for a metropolitan area network, and metropolitan usually refers to, well, like a larger city-based area. So these types of networks are usually not one network, but a collection of networks that are chained together to cover a large area. And typically you'll see these in really wide areas, like what's written here, such as a university campus. Really a wide area where all the network access points are to be controlled. That's usually where a metropolitan area network will be used. And then how are computers on a network identified for the third part? Through their IP address assigned by the network internet service provider. The IP address is the numerical digital address that's assigned to each computer when it enters the network, and it can change throughout, dynamic IP addresses, and that coding of the IP address is used to identify each machine on the network. And then the third question, or the collection of questions, was the true or false. And so the first one was hardware address is another term for IP address. That is false. Hardware address is another term for MAC address, as the section for MAC address in the textbook will state. The next was an IP address can uniquely identify any computer in the world. That is also false. Reading through the section in the textbook on IP addresses, it says with millions and millions of computers in the world, there are not enough IP addresses to address them all. So there are things like private address and dynamic IP address that make that have more combinations available to more machines. Third was a modem is needed for all connections to the internet. That is also false. The section was actually titled hubs, modems, and switches. All three can connect to the internet. Fourth, a peer-to-peer network has no centralized server. This is true. Peer-to-peer network is just as the name suggests. It's a client computer to a client computer. Both a peer-to-peer network has no sort of central control. It's controlled amongst the two people on the server. And then the fifth was servers perform jobs including user authentication. This is also true. Authentication servers was actually a specific name for a type of server, and the server in a network performs multiple functions for the client, including identification and authentication.